Welcome back. It's time for our book chat. Now, this is a book I've been looking forward to talking about, The Marriage Recipe. Now, this is a book that draws practical tips from the Bible and personal experiences of the author to propose the possibility of paradise in marriage. Mfon Mwabuoku. Did I get that right? I did? Mwabuoku. Yes. Got it. She's a writer, speaker, and counselor. She's committed to helping women achieve purposeful and successful lives. Thank you so much for showing up for us today.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for putting this book together.
Thank you.
Okay, so as soon as I saw the word recipe, I started thinking, well, is she a chef? Does she cook? You know, and then when you put marriage in there, it makes you think, okay, she's a counselor, marriage counselor. Okay. So are any of these true?
Okay. Yes, I am a counselor.
Okay.
Actually qualified one.
Okay.
And I cook.
And
a lot. So I guess that's why it kind of like got married into that.
Okay.
But I think why I called it a recipe is because recipes are like formulas.
Okay.
And I have a science background,
okay.
and I love formulas.
Okay.
And the reason I love formulas is because it doesn't discriminate. So I could be in Japan, and if I have the same formula with the person in Nigeria or the person in Germany, and we did the same things, we would get the same results.
All right.
So I believe marriage is like that too. It does have a formula, or as I call it, a recipe. So if everyone does or uses the same ingredients under the same circumstances, you would get the same results.
Okay, I like where you added under the same circumstances, yes. Because I've heard many, many times that some things can work for my marriage, it cannot work for other people's marriage, you know, and then you give advice to people and then sometimes they take it and then things go wrong. You know, so it was kind of risky putting together a formula or a recipe for marriage. But I feel you must have had some really great testimonies about the book so far.
Yes, I have. I've had people come back to me and say, I had one lady say to me, I read your chapter on honor and how to resolve conflict, and that has changed how I handle conflicts in my home.
Okay.
I've become more patient.
Okay.
I've also had people also talk to me about, you know, the chapter on lovemaking as well, and how that has, you know, made them rethink what they're doing in that regards in their own marriages. Okay. So I've had good feedback.
I like the fact that you went straight to the lovemaking part, because I was going to get there last.
Oh.
So there is a chapter on lovemaking here, and you quote Mark chapter 10, verse 8 here. You say, "And the two shall become one flesh." Just as hot sauce adds a zing to a pot of soup, so sex spices up a marriage. I like the way you went about this, but you also go into that chapter by talking about giving and receiving pleasure.
Yes.
Would you mind talking a bit about that?
That's what lovemaking is actually. It's making something. So when you're making something, there's always some kind of giving, some kind of taking out things, you know, that don't need to be there and putting in something that needs to be there.
Okay.
And so lovemaking is about pleasure. You know, there's nothing wrong with having pleasure.
Okay.
Most people will tell you, okay, they make love because they want to procreate. That's not God's plan. It was supposed to be pleasant.
Okay.
And so the only way you can get that to happen is when you go in there with that kind of servant attitude, where you're coming in and you want to make the other person feel good.
Okay.
Not about you. It's not, lovemaking isn't selfish.
Okay.
You know, the word itself, love is not selfish. You know, and that's why I prefer the word lovemaking to sex, because sex is just kind of like, you know, straightforward. But lovemaking makes me know that I have to be thinking about it from the aspect of how God describes love, and love is giving.
Okay.
Love is selfless. So you go in there to give love, and then your receiving love actually is a direct result of you having gone there to give love.
Okay. All right. So, you know, this is a different perspective for a lot of people. I even think, maybe even myself, because of the fact that people want to procreate, they want to go forth and multiply. And women have often gone into the bedroom with that mindset of, okay, let me just give him what he wants, as opposed to giving him pleasure. Okay. So let's talk a bit about your marriage now. Did you ever have that mindset in the beginning? Well,
no.
Okay.
I think I've been blessed with the fact that I've always been in love with my husband. You know, so we've always had chemistry.
Okay.
So, but I think earlier on, just before I got married, I went to marital classes in my church, and one of the things that we were taught was about lovemaking too. Okay. And I think most of the principles that I've used in my marriage stemmed from that. And one thing I was taught, which is what I've also shared in this book, is go in there and please him.
Okay.
Because you love him.
Okay.
And so that has always been my mindset. So I've never gone in there and felt, okay, we just want to, you know.
It's a duty.
It's a duty kind of thing. I just want to get pregnant, or just so you let me alone. No, it's about, I love you so much, I want you to be happy. And that does make the other person happy.
Okay, so you also talk about communication and the line of communication here. There's a formula, as you put it earlier. Communication equals to clear message plus listening plus feedback.
Yes.
Can you break that down, please?
Okay, so communication, you have something you want to say. You have something you want to share with the other person. Now, the other person has to listen.
Okay.
That's, as you mean, from the other perspective now, has to listen to be able to get the right message.
Okay.
What were you really saying? And it is after you've listened, gotten the message, you do have to have a feedback, some kind of response. If there's no response, then communication hasn't actually happened. Because if I'm talking to you, just like what we're doing now, we're communicating, so you're saying something to me, I'm listening, taking time to, you know, understand what you're saying, and then I'm responding to you. That's what communication is. Okay. If any of those steps gets missed, then communication hasn't happened. So both ways, for the husband, for the wife, you need to be sure you know what your message is. And then from the feedback as well, you also know if the message you sent across is the message you wanted to send in the first place.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like the fact that you said clear message.
Yes.
So I feel like a lot of people speak in parables, speaking, you know, speaking code, and the messages are not often clear.
Yes.
So, and then in terms of lines of communication, if you get an instruction from your husband, for instance, a lot of women have been taught to just, you know, carry out that instruction and not actually talk back. Do you think this is healthy?
No, I don't. I think if it's an instruction, especially if you don't understand what it is, then ask questions and be sure you know what he's saying. And I don't think in marriage you're supposed to be this silent partner who is, you know, put down like a floor mat or something. I'm talking about women now, and that would bring me to something I talked about in my book, which is submission. Some people misinterpret that to mean you have no rights, you have no voice, and that's not true.
Okay.
Submission is I honor, I acknowledge your role in my life, and I talk about it in the book, and I say it's like an organogram. So in the workplace, you have the MD, you have the managers. Okay. There's some kind of hierarchy, yeah, ranking. Not because anybody's inferior to the other, but because there has to be some kind of order. And if there's going to be order, there has to be that kind of, you know, ranking, so to speak. So, no, don't just be, he gives you an instruction, you don't question it. Okay. And especially if it's something that's outside of the will of God, you have the right to say no.
I have to say a big thank you to you for coming to the show to explain this to us. There's still so much in this book. You define love here as it is defined in the good book itself. You also talk a lot about communication, love making, and of course, God himself. Yeah. I'm just going to wrap this up and ask, why is it that God is so important in marriage, as quickly as possible?
Because he's the author of it. He's the expert. Okay. It makes sense to go to the expert if you need help or you want to find out how to do anything. I wouldn't take my car to a carpenter.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mfon, for coming to the studio. The Marriage Recipe is the name of the book. I'm already really interested in going through it cover to cover, and hopefully you will be too.